I'd like to call the combined study session and regular board meeting to order and let the record reflect that all board members are present. Dr. Ritter is not with us tonight, but Dr. Chodas, Mr. Chodas is going to fill in, particularly since so much of what we're talking about tonight from the administration's perspective is budget related. I want to apologize for starting a little bit late. We were in a previous meeting related to the superintendent search that just went over a few minutes, but appreciate your patience. And so will you please join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We were going to have a special recognition tonight of HTV out at Hillcrest, but because of the inclement weather, we have postponed that till next month. So we will move on to our strategic discussion, which is related to budget and setting priorities. So, Mr. Chodas.
On the screen is the budget development process that we've discussed a number of times. Highlighted in yellow is the point at which we're at in this meeting. We had indicated that December we would come to the board and ask that the board prioritize changes to the budget. In so doing, and in aligning the changes to the strategic plan, what we've done is identified the district's goals and indicators as the means for the prioritization. And with that, as Jill is handing out the detail, I'll turn it over to Jill to discuss in more detail the goals and indicators.
So one of the ways to get input from the board is to rank the SP5 indicators that have the measures. So the documents that you have received, the first one is a list of SP5 indicators and measures. The cover sheet is the big broad, the 12 that you'll be asked to rank. From there gives detail underneath each indicator for the measures that go along with that. And so to collect your feedback, what we're asking is that you complete this document. So you'll rank each one. So if you feel like student engagement is your top priority, you would give that rank, and then you could use a measurement underneath of that to explain why. That would be your highest rank. So any questions or comments?
Go ahead, Mr. Osborne.
I guess my question is just kind of more of a general question. Let's assume that postgraduate readiness is number one in our ranking. This board all agrees. How does that, and under postgraduate readiness, I guess my question is, there are 8 indicators. How does our telling you that postgraduate readiness is our number one ranking of these 12 influence your budget decision?
What Cabinet will do will be to accumulate budget changes for next year. We will go through a process of prioritizing those changes. We'll come up with a ranked list. Then what we'll do is we will apply the ranking provided by the board. So, for example, and you know, we've not gone through the details, so this is just hypothetical. Let's say, for example, we have a budget request on the table that Cabinet has assigned 500 points to. And let's say, for example, we know that the board has ranked that as the top. So maybe it will get an additional 10% or 15% or 20%. So we'll apply that percentage against the 500 points to make it 550 points or 500 or 600 points, and it will thus be moved up the ranking. So it's input from both the board and from administration.
But I guess I just kind of don't understand how this ranking, when you're considering new available monies that you have to spend, how you're going to say, well, the board wants postgraduate readiness, and so we're going to spend money on this item and not this item because of that. I just don't see how that is possible with this ranking system. And I guess the general question, I just don't understand how this provides any direction to administration in the budget process.
Well,
That's my concern, I guess.
It's my understanding, so say student engagement is number one from the board's perspective. And in that, like class size is written down by several of us as the measure there, or the funding the stipends, which is included in that
Right.
piece too. So it's not just necessarily the ranking of the indicator, but it's also
The comments associated
comments
with it.
associated with the ranking, right?
Right.
And there are some measurements under several different indicators that have the same measurements. So if class size is really important, to look through that, and then those could be the ranks. So some of this will get fleshed out. It will come to the top once to look at the rankings and the comments. Go ahead. Yeah.
And I guess some of mine, I mean, some of the questions were kind of the same, but when it got down to it, I mean, I'm not sure how you take anything off this list. That's the problem I'm seeing, and parts of it that said we're going to increase 5% on a survey. Aren't we going to do the surveys no matter what? So that I just didn't see how that the surveys were going to. I didn't see how that was a part of the budget discussion. But in my ranking, when I got down to, I finally could rank the 12, because it seemed like to me if you took care of some, it took care of the other. I mean, we just had a report on ACT scores. Well, I think that's an end. I don't think it's, I think if you want higher ACT scores, you have to do more on student engagement, you have to do more on class size, you have to do more on professional learning, and then you get higher ACTs. The same postgraduate readiness. If we do what we're supposed to, then the other things take. I see some of me, just personally, I see some of them as ends, not a means. Some of the others are means to get there. It doesn't mean I put academic performance, which is just test scores, as 12, because I think if we do all the other things, those will automatically take care of themselves. I don't think you work backwards. I think you work the other way. So, and when I looked at that, then I thought, well, I would really don't, if somebody looked at my ranking, when I put it on here and I say postgraduate readiness is 11 and academic performance is 12, they'll say, what the heck are you, you know, what? But I see that as an end, that if we do the right things on the other things, those will take care of themselves. We're really not focusing on those. So I may need more room when I'm doing this for comments, so I don't look like I don't care about what happens in the grad grade or something. But that's, when I first started, it just seemed like an impossible task to me. But it got down to where it was manageable based on how I saw it.
And these are just all listed because these are the measures that are associated with these indicators that we're looking at
Correct.
throughout the district. So each of these might not have a budget implication, or some of these are going to be more easily identified to budget priorities than others, right?
It is
Yeah.
the full list of the SP5 measures that are the ones that are feeding the dashboard.
Go ahead, Mrs. Bush.
I think we need to focus. And what bothered me, and this is my first time around, but everything under the sun, yes, we want everything to be great. But we've taken a focus on some aspects of where we're going in the past. We need to focus on the areas we have not dealt with well. And I have trouble finding them on here. But if we want to get to the ultimate, we need to go with the beginning, and we need to focus on the basics, which of course means to me early childhood education. So sorting through this, not to say, I'm sorry,
That's all right.
because we say we want early childhood education, doesn't mean we don't want good graduate numbers, that we don't want people to be successful, but we've got to take 300 different initiatives and say, this year we're going to focus on this because we have to focus money in order to make a difference. We have to focus the money where it hasn't been and where it needs to be for the future. So this document drives me crazy. I'm sorry.
Well,
but we need to go back.
This is
and
the purpose,
say,
to get a focus. It's so that we can get a collective focus from the board, so that it's not just each individual person's, focus driving the budget discussion, but that we get a collective understanding of where we see those priorities as a board. So if on this, early childhood, or, reading at, everybody level by third grade is identified by all of us, then we, are able to look at that and go, okay, what feeds into that?
Okay, we'll have to see what feeds into it.
And I empathize with, the board trying to rank these. It's similar to what Cabinet goes through as we struggle with ranking the requests that are provided to us on an annual basis.
Yeah, but at some level, we've got to get to a point. We're not saying that the others aren't as important. We're saying these are our priorities.
Right.
So, and I think if you look at your 12, you're not to personally say that's not important to me. It's just this is where the focus, because of these particular things that I feel where we should. Go ahead, Tom.
Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. And I kind of envisioned, here we've been saying for years, we want more input on budget planning, we want more input, and now you're giving it to us. So we've got to take it if you're giving it to us. I imagine going back through the OSRs now over the course of the year and looking at weaknesses and strengths and need for extra resources, and helping me then put that with this and give you input as to what I saw as the needs that weren't met and need to be met to hit these targets. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Well, not at this stage. This is more strategic level.
Here.
Right.
I'm not picking on specific things, but saying, oh yes, I remember in February there were some indicators in administrative support that weren't being met. So maybe would I rank that higher or lower?
And that's one of the things. We will definitely use the OSRs as a tool for input into the budget.
And the idea is to have this input back fairly quickly, right?
ASAP, yes.
Which means Friday, Monday.
Monday would be fine. Right.
We've
But
got a
is-
lot. We've got a lot on our plate right now with a couple other things going on too. So, go ahead, Jerry.
And just process-wise, as we rank these and you come up with some consensus, whatever you come up with, however they fall out, then is it logical to go when we start our budgeting process, or you bring the first budget to us, or whatever the case may be, that as we look at where we're spending our resources and providing resources, it will be consistent with the priorities of these 12. Is that kind of where, I mean, we're not, like you said, we're not there yet, but that's what you're trying.
I can't say 100%. It will influence the budget. But I don't think you'll be able to take the budget requests and go, okay, the first 10, at the top of the priority list were all our number one ranked item.
Well, because these are very strategic issues.
Right.
And I'm having a little trouble, like Mr. Hosmer, how that's going to get down to what's in the budget based on that. And I'm not trying to denigrate what we're doing here, because I think it's important that this board prioritizes what's important. I haven't crossed that bridge yet. I'm trying to get across the bridge, and I haven't figured out how to, because as Mr. Renner said, if you focus on student achievement, well, I kind of agree that the first 10 would take care of that one if you did, though. So that, and I didn't look at it that way. I wish I had thought of it that way, but that was good. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm having a little trouble making that leap to the next step, and that's what you guys get paid to do. But I'm deer in headlight right at the moment, a little bit on it, to make sure that what I'm giving you is how I get there. So,
I guess my concern, and Jerry just hit on it, is that if we just fill this out and send it in and it's tabulated, well then, unless we just heard Bruce say that he's not going to rank academic achievement up there on the top, we wouldn't understand his reasoning for that. And I might rank it at the top of my list. So it goes in there and it's right in the middle, because we got one number 1, one number 12. But we're talking the same thing. So, I mean, I do want this process, but I guess what I would like is this board to discuss the focus areas. I mean, early childhood education was brought up. I mean, that's a big budget, could be a big budget item. And I think as a board, we need to decide, should we tell you we want that to be a budget item? Teacher salaries, that's a big budget item. That we need to either say we want you to carve out that money before you start filling in the other things, or we're okay with you filling in the other things, and if we have the money, we have the money. Because we've done that in the past where, late in the process, we said, wait a second, we want to do something for teachers, and we had to kind of reconfigure things. So I'm just concerned that we fill this out and we don't know where we're all coming from. We don't know exactly what the indicator actually means to the administration. Then we're left with us doing a lot of work for not much payback.
But it's the indicator plus the measure, right?
Right.
Like if you look at market competitiveness, underneath there is number 3, increased number of early childhood options for SPS students. So if that were an important priority to you as an individual, you would probably rank that area number 1, and you would put early childhood next to it.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So to me, this is, and again, this is a process. We've asked the administration to come to us to try to figure out a good way to get early input at the very strategic level. It's not going to be perfect, but it's also my understanding, or it would be my hope, and what I maybe hear other board members saying, is that we would at least get back what these results were that got compiled, so that we could collectively look at those and make sure that we're in a, after we each individually get to have some input, then we would have a discussion about, does that really represent what we want to do going forward?
Because I think the context is really important. Because, I rank that one, just what you just said, market competitiveness is number 1. Early childhood, period. That was it. But if I just marked it 1, you wouldn't have a clue as to why I marked it number 1. So I think the comment in the context of where you're coming from, just like Mr. Renner's putting academic achievement of 12, well, with an explanation there, that makes sense. I understand that. But I think it's really important to understand, just because I ranked it number one with no context or no comment, to me, tells you nothing. It doesn't really tell me as a board anything, just because I ranked it number one.
Right.
Because there's a lot of stuff in there, and so it really doesn't give me good data, or wouldn't think it would give you good data to sit down as a cabinet and go, okay, the board said, hey, early childhood is a priority. We need to do something with that and make it a priority in the district. And
Well, and each indicator doesn't happen in isolation.
that's right.
They're all connected. So if one of them falls out, the rest of them are going to suffer the same way. So that's why they're all priorities. It's just a rank of priority. And another idea to look at is, to be a good steward of data, you can't just look at one data point and decide to put all of your eggs in that basket because of one data point. That's why the quantitative and qualitative part of this is important, to look at the comments and see what themes come out from the comments, because both of them are equally as important.
Yeah, it's strange to me that early childhood education comes under market competitiveness, not under student preparation. I guess that's one of the problems I have. So somehow we need to link that back and put our other priorities under what's it take for student preparation, because those are not in isolation.
Well, let's not get hung up on where things, I mean, it sounds to me like people are much more interested in the measures and making sure that those comments about what measures are important to them get listed. And if that's a better process for people, make sure you do that, you know. And
But does it make more sense to have a discussion now as opposed to filling out a ranking that gets tabulated back to us?
yeah, I guess that the
And I'm not saying tonight. I'm just saying that when Jerry says, "Well, my top three are this," I'd like to kind of have a back and forth. Of why is that? What are you thinking about when you say that?
Can we?
And maybe we can. The board says, "Yeah, we all see that." Administration, we want you to put a focus on X. It seems like there'd be benefit to that as opposed to just a kind of a antiseptic ranking with comments that gets back to us with, here's why they ranked and here are the 25 comments that we have.
Well, the one thing this allows people to do is to have some time to reflect on it personally, you know, and we could do that. We could do that and then bring it back. We could do that, have it collated, and then have a discussion around the results. So, I mean, I think that's certainly up for discussion to make sure.
And I guess, in my thought, the way I looked at it was from a budgetary standpoint. I looked at it with, what do I think we need to be focusing on next year? Budgetary items,
right,
strategically. And if that means I want more money in early childhood, I think that's a discussion. I see where Ms. Thompson's coming. I think we need to study. I'm kind of like Dr. Prater. I didn't go into it way deep, other than a few things that I knew really important. Because it got down to, after the top three, I don't know how to rank the last 8, because they're all about equal. But the top 3 are pretty easy. And I knew why I wanted those. And so I think I really think the context of where we're coming from is really important, because otherwise to me, from an administrative standpoint, you're shooting in the dark. If you don't have some consensus or direction from this board, you're just kind of throwing up something, and then I wonder how the board's going to take this, with no, what I would consider direction, as opposed to, well, let's see if they'll buy this. And not that you wouldn't, but you know what I'm saying? I think if that way you know what to bring to us much better than you would just take a shot at it.
I think we go ahead and send this in, and then at the next working meeting, the results are collated, and that's when we have a general discussion. That would be my recommendation.
Would that still be early enough for, that would be 1st of January. The main thing is that you get input early, so that we're not backpedaling in May to say, no, that's not really what we wanted, right?
Right.
So, even if we take a little bit more time in the beginning, it's probably going to save us a lot of time and effort in the end. So, I mean, Steve, it's
Right, and as you pointed out, this is the first time, we've done this, so, we're learning as well as we go through
well,
this.
and I think we've been putting lately we've been putting a lot of this kind of do this on your own and get it back to us and kind of thing. And I can see the value of that, but I can see what Mr. Hosmer's saying too is the value of the collective discussion and being able to see where people are coming from. So the only thing I would ask is if I turn this in, that I get a copy back, because I may not remember exactly, the 5 or 6 or 7 different things I said. So I guess what I would just ask is that the board members would get back their documents or a copy of them so that we can have them at the next meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Get a copy of everybody's.
Oh, yeah.
They could
Yeah.
collate it and then just attach a copy of each one of ours.
Oh, that's
the
nice.
thing.
So the question is,
And it's-
when does he want our input? When does he
You
want
said
our?
Monday, right?
Did you say Monday?
That would be nice, yes.
Oh, that's not what you told me a while ago.
Yeah, I know.
You told me tonight.
What
I'm
did you
flexible.
What'd you tell me tomorrow, right?
You told me tonight.
Oh, tonight, I know.
That was the goal.
I know. But it would come back. We got this sent in the email to us. Was it a fillable form? I didn't try to. It
Yes.
was a fillable form? Okay, so we could just
Yeah.
type it in there and send it back, and then we would have a copy and we wouldn't have to worry about that.
Right.
But then if it could be collated, I think that's a really good idea, Bruce, to, if we could see what other people said. And then at our January meeting, we will just substitute whatever the strategic discussion was supposed to be, and we'll do this again. Is that agreeable to everyone? Andy, is that better for you too? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you just want to highlight? Okay, thank you. The modification of the agenda, are there any modifications? I think, oh, Dr. Prater, case.
Yes, I would like to request that we table, it's down here where, updates to Board of Education policies, Section D, fiscal management, at this time, just due to the number of items we have to discuss tonight, 3 of our OSRs and other discussion, that we table that till our January meeting.
Is everybody in agreement with that? Just the policies, reviewing the policies? Okay. Seeing no objection, we'll move on. Are there any public comments related to the agenda? Mrs. Luton? Oh, yeah. Moving right along. Really, in trying to move things along because of the weather and because we had a meeting prior to this, just in general, is there anything that any board members want to report of being out in schools or the community that was particularly maybe a highlight or something that you're doing? So.
I might just mention last Thursday and Friday, Dr. Ritter, myself, and Ms. Moore and Jill, Ms. Palmer, attended the Governor's Conference on Education Improvement in Columbia. And basically the whole context is implementing Baldridge continuous improvement in school districts. 130 people. Ms. Moore did an amazing presentation on what Springfield is doing. And I heard several comments. It's the best conference I've been to, Baldridge Conference, that I've attended. And even Dr. Ritter said that was the best he'd been to, and he's been to, I don't know how many he's been to. So hopefully it's the start of things, but that's starting to roll in the state of Missouri. But it was nice to get the governor on board. He was there and supported it pretty significantly, so that was kind of a nice thing. But our staff did a great job putting their spin on it for the rest of the attendees. We had high-powered speakers come in from across the country. It was just really, really good.
Great.
I attended our community school has been active once again. Robertson had a group of community volunteers come in and help them with an art project where classes with the community artists put together pretty impressive artwork for elementary school, and then they sold that and are selling it still in a fundraising campaign to benefit the Child Advocacy Center, CASA, and another one. Anyway, because the kids wanted to provide support to help troubled kids.
Wow.
And pretty impressive. And these kids did a great job.
Anything else? I know we're all out there a lot, so it's always good to just pick out a few highlights. Great. And superintendent's report.
Yes, over the last 10 years, I've been creating a list of issues, hoping for this opportunity. But I left it in my office, so I'll pass.
Well, we appreciate you filling in, Mr. Chodes. I would like to say and thank our staff. I know these weather decisions are always tough to call, but I think you all have done an excellent job. I'd like to thank our staff. I drive by Central High School every day, and the custodial staff has been out there really taking care of the sidewalks and doing those kinds of things. So oftentimes a snow day for students and teachers doesn't necessarily mean a snow day for particularly our staff that works outside. So just like to thank everybody. Do we have a decision about tomorrow yet?
It's already been
Hero?
called.
Oh,
As of right now, we're moving forward with school.
Okay.
So something happens overnight, we're not expecting. Of course, be out checking for the relief is concerned, but
I've already sent out multiple texts that we're having school.
we are having
I've got
school as of right now.
I'm kind of out of the loop
Not
now that my,
expect that to change.
okay.
Nice to be.
Yeah, it is kind of nice to, it's like sometimes I lose track, but I had somebody in the community ask me yesterday if the board was the final decision makers on that. I'm like, no, thank goodness we aren't. So, all right. Now, no public comments on agenda items. So we will move on to items for, information. Sorry. Our OSRs.
Good evening again.
Hello.
Hello. This evening we have 3 programs to review. The first is Purchasing Services, then Parents as Teachers, and Title I. So I will turn it over. Thank you, Mr. Pelletier.
Good evening. I'm Dave Pelletier from Purchasing, and I'll take a few minutes to provide a purchasing services update. One of the highlights that we continue to see is the revenue being generated through GovDeals. We continue to go forward with that program. Last year we generated $61,000 in revenue through the sale of our goods. And one thing I've been asking for is an additional FTE that we can assign into the warehouse so we can dedicate an individual to that process. Currently, right now, we just get rid of it because it's in the way. But if we had a person that we could assign time to that to actually test the equipment and do some more additional research with that, we feel that we can generate even more revenue. So we were granted an FTE a few months ago, and we're in the process of trying to hire somebody. And we're going to run a trial to see what's actually happening as we dedicate more time to that process. So that's kind of what we're looking for there. We've been doing that with GovDeals for 4 years, and we've generated $380,000 in revenue. So that's a good use of time. A key opportunity for improvement, we have a difficult time being able to calculate procurement process savings ratios and some other efficiency ratios within our department. We modeled our goals and indicators off of the Council of Great City Schools goals. And one of the things we're finding is in higher performing procurement departments, they have a fully automated procurement system. At this point, our system allows us to do things online, but it's not fully automated. And by that, I mean you can calculate all these ratios. You can do online bidding where responses are submitted online. Vendors can do a lot of things on there. So that's an area that we've also asked for some assistance with. Fully automated procurement systems will allow us to have a detailed accounting of what we're doing and how we're comparing to the Council of Great City Schools and their indicators. They'll also allow for online bidding, which will produce shorter lead times and turnaround times. And one of the goals, there's some of the goals that we have in yellow, our times aren't where they need to be. So I'm hopeful with that we can reduce that time, which would get the product into the hands of the people of the site sooner. Online bidding will also allow for increased savings. There's a contracts module that can be used with construction and bond projects. So there's a lot of things that go into that other than just reporting. There's also a vendor self-service tool where the vendors can then monitor the status of an open bid, a closed bid. They can see the results. They can see their payment status if they've been awarded contracts. So there's a lot of time savings that you can also realize through that.
Any questions?
Are there any questions, Mr. Pelletier? Go ahead.
Just a quick one. So
Yep.
we might plan or expect to see with budget requests this come forward, the Munis system enhancement request that you have. So that would be a budget item
Yes.
that would come to us.
Yeah, it's kind of been in the works. It's a timing thing. You obviously, when you implement new software, you have to be able to implement it and use it. So it would have to be at a point where we could really dedicate somebody to that and getting it all set up.
Mr. Lee?
A couple questions. One on the surplus revenue or surplus. What are the online auctions that you use? What are some of those, or is that a specific surplus property?
We use
location?
we use a company called GovDeals, and we post everything that comes back to us, from textbooks to computers to molds left over at a playground, just anything.
Do we buy much stuff off the same auction?
No. No, I'm sure I understand you.
I mean, somebody's buying what you're surplusing.
Right.
Do we, in turn, buy stuff off of the same?
Generally, it's not worth buying. I mean, it's if we've used it and then it's used up, it's pretty much run its
So
course.
it's not. It's more of a.
It's more of a salvage disposal.
Okay. That's what I'm trying. More of a salvage than
People
some of
will
the
take the
online auctions
computers
where-
and disassemble them and reassemble them and make new parts out of them.
Because I know there's some online auction things that actually look at taking just stuff you don't use, not junk.
Yeah,
Salvage.
actually, right now, we have not had to throw anything away since we've started this because they buy everything. So,
Yeah. P cards. Mm-hmm. Do we get a rebate on P cards?
Yes,
what kind
we
of
do.
rebate do we get?
I think it's currently, we're part of a group, AEPA, I believe that's what it is. It's a little over, I think it's where's Bob Wells in here? He knows all those. 1.12%, I think. So last year we realized about $30,000.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do is run more accounts payable spend through the P card where we can generate additional revenue there as well. And that's another process that we have to.
That's a good.
So pretty much the person that's been hired to handle the online auction really pays for itself, plus.
And that's the way we're going to approach that.
Yeah.
The revenue
so
generated.
we'd be able
will-
to monitor that to make
Yes.
sure they are paying for themselves. Okay. Anybody else on that? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have parents as teachers. Riley?
Hello. Just some highlighted changes. We're still embarking upon the affiliation process from National Center that I explained in some detail last year. This is a curriculum change and also a change in format for National Center for Parents as Teachers. And we are one of 75 districts in the state participating in an anonymous grant to help facilitate that process. We are one of 47 districts that are have kind of declared that, yes, we are planning to be an affiliate program by the end of this current school year. With the uncertainty, you'll see on my report, with the uncertainty of the affiliation, trying to figure it out last year, we did leave one FTE unfilled, and that helps explain some of our changes in numbers, both in the number of personal visits that were given and the decrease of the number of families receiving visits. That can also be explained by the intensity of visits. We have increased the intensity of visits, especially to our high needs families. And then along with that also, part of that affiliation model is to serve our highest needs families a lot of times, twice a month. And we do have 100 families that we've identified as affiliate families, is what we're calling them. And those are those families that are receiving the highest needs visits and receiving visits as often as twice a month.
Any questions?
The new definition of parents as teachers and the limitations and challenges you have, you cannot expand that program as it stands now and change what they want, the intensity and focusing on low income families.
What we've done is basically created a hybrid model. That's my best word for that, is that we're part National Center affiliate program and we're part Springfield program. And so we have this small group of families that we're seeing intensely. About 100 of our 2,100 families we're seeing with that great intensity, and then the other 2,000 families we're seeing kind of dependent upon what the parent educator and the family have determined their needs are.
What kind of a gap is there between the need and the ability to feed it?
There's a large gap. It's been an education and an evolution process with our families, in that this is by far the lowest number of families we've ever served in Parents as Teachers. I did put that in my report also, that it has gradually declined from our cuts 5 years ago. We've just had lots and lots of families drop out of the program that have basically said, well, we don't need it. Someone can use it more than we can. But then we also have those families that could be receiving monthly visits or twice a month visits that we're just not able to provide those visits to.
Several. You mentioned we were at the lowest level in 12 this year.
Mm-hmm.
What is a fully funded Parents as Teacher program? I mean, you got 1.365 budgeted. What are we talking about? If what you would consider a fully funded, meeting the needs in our community, what would that be?
I'm going to give you kind of a scaffolded answer, in that there's what we were about 5 years ago, and it was about double the funding that we have now. We had about a 60% cut in funding. And with that, we served about 3,500 families. If we were truly to serve all families within the Springfield area and just keep it a very open-ended, either one time per year all the way up to 24 times in a year, it would probably be almost double that again.
In terms of families or money?
Both.
So there are about 7,000
families, yes.
They have kids in our district.
Mm-hmm, correct.
That are pre-K.
Right, that have a pre-K child.
But is there a waiting list for your services?
Currently, no. We see everyone at least once with at least a screening. We've implemented a screening team again, and then from that screening, we decide if a family can be seen or not.
So that 7,000 is just who's present. It's not necessarily 7,000 that
Correct.
have indicated they want to be served and we can't serve them.
Correct.
Okay.
The 1.3 million, how much of that is local and how much of that's state?
We're currently about 60% local and about 40% state.
And 5 years ago, what was it?
The opposite. And we were around 2 million, and our, we were at like 1.8 million, and our reimbursement was a little over $900,000 from the state. So about 55-45 actually.
So the 2.6 million you're talking about to get back to where we were, that would be total cost of the program, irrespective of where the money came from.
Correct.
So that's what you would need. Okay.
Correct.
Go ahead, Mr. Osborne.
And you may have already answered this in your introduction. The average number of visits, high needs, in 2013, 2014 was 3.59, and we're looking for at least 9 there. Is it just the fact that you didn't fill the FTE, or is there something else there that is going on?
Well, there was an open FTE, and then there was an elimination of about 16 positions 5 years ago.
Okay, I see. Okay, so the high needs people, the high needs kids we're serving, we're not even giving the visits we need to give them, correct?
Correct, especially if you use the definition of National Center's definition. Their definition, if any family has 2 or more high needs indicators, is that we'll see them twice a month.
And I guess my comment, I've said this before, but this community is going through a long debate about early childhood education and the importance of early childhood education, and I've always seen parents as teachers as just a wonderful adjunct to that, because you do the screening, you can kind of identify problems and send people to resources and continue with that family. And I think part of the thing you talked about a number of years ago was the idea that everybody's available for this. Is kind of like the breakfast in the classroom. All of a sudden we get humongous participation in breakfast in the classroom because it's open and free to everybody. And middle school kids don't refuse breakfast because they're going to be labeled as poor. So I really think that I know it's a big funding issue, but I think we kind of cut off our nose to spite our face when we worry about kids coming into kindergarten, and then we cut programs that are designed to help those kids come into kindergarten ready to learn. So that's my soapbox, and I'll get off now.
We have a couple of other soapboxes over here.
Anyone else have comments about this or questions? Go ahead.
You have a little bit on Wonder Years. It's on the
Yeah,
chart.
it will be in Title I.
Oh, it'll be under Title I.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ask Dr. Brian Hubbard to join me. We have a different measure to look at academic performance. And before Brian begins his report, we'd just like to give you an overview of effect size. If you'll recall, as part of the board's OSR and their professional learning, you guys remember the blue book, Visible Learning, that all staff members were given? This looks at effect size. So what we can do with effect size is look at how students achieve. Effect size allows educators to have a standardized measurement. So regardless of the test, regardless of the assessment, there's a benchmark to say at 0.4, it starts the zone of desired effect. So at 0.4, it's equivalent to, as far as Hattie's research, that's a year's worth of growth. So 0.8 can be looked at 2 years. As a reminder, Hattie says a lot in his research that effect size is a very, very high level to look at research and what else is happening in there, to start asking questions and not necessarily to start looking at decision making, but from a very high level. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Hubbard.
Good evening. I'd like to go over our summary here for the OSR for Title I. The first thing I'll point out is talking about the effect size, looking at our early interventions. The effect size for all of our math interventions show a growth of a year or more, or at least a year or more. But our early interventions, such as Wonder Years and Reading Recovery and Literacy Groups, show an effect size of 2 or more years growth. So we see, as we've discussed, more of an impact whenever we have early intervention. Again, our survey data has remained positive, no change there. Our key opportunities for improvement deal with the need to increase the effect size for grades 6 through 8 interventions in reading and math. Also, the coaching effectiveness, which is something that's a little bit difficult to measure because the coach is in the building. However, they're usually, the literacy coach and math coach would be doing coaching cycles with specific teachers on specific subjects. And so we'll look at some of that data later and discuss that. And again, for the coaching survey we gave to classroom teachers, that did dip a little bit for last year. Our next steps would be to analyze the data for grades 6 through 8 reading and math interventions, have some site visits with coaches, and do more mid-cycle reviews based on their coaching goals. That way we are more responsive to their goals that they've made. And then number 3, survey classroom teachers in the middle of the year rather than just at the end, and provide that information to coaches so we can make more adaptations or really make sure that we're meeting the needs of the teachers at mid-year, and then adjust for that survey.
Any questions?
Can you define effect size?
Effect size shows the movement or progress of a group of students. So either, there's 2 ways to do it. Either you can look at 2 different groups that had a treatment or not, or the same group of students and what their progress was. So it's a standardized way of looking at progress.
So what method do you use here? And so which method are you using here?
It's the same group of students beginning and ending.
But not all of the students?
No, and I will. And that's Brian.
We've put in parentheses behind, next to each assessment under effect size, you can see the number of students. Some of these deal with, most of these at the top deal with the students that are working with an interventionist. So if you look at number 1, this is specific to Wonder Years, and you can see the actual effect size for that is 0.8. And so that's a significant effect size.
Something different. We don't have that.
Oh, you guys have something different.
It just doesn't have the numbers on it.
Oh, it doesn't have?
Effect size on ours.
Oh. What's that? Okay. So as you can see, that 0.8 is significant. 0.4 would mean close to a year's growth, and a very significant effect size. So 0.8 is double that. And as you can see, we have a higher effect size as far as reading recovery. That's the highest effect size of the interventions. Yes, Mrs. Bush?
You're talking to me. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
How do you choose the students that are included in those 220 or 120 or whatever?
Those are the students that are served. Like for Wonder Years, we have there were 220 students that had a beginning and ending dial score, and so the dial is the measurement that we use.
So all the students in Wonder Years.
All the students in Wonder Years, yeah. And then for reading recovery, those would be all the students that had a pre and a post for reading recovery.
Do they? Okay. So not every.
No, there are some. If they moved away and we didn't have the data, we didn't include it because we didn't have a beginning and ending score.
But any student who is in reading recovery is included in
Exactly.
this.
And then literacy groups, reading recovery, they work, that's our first grade intervention. They work one-on-one with students for half the day. The other half the day is in small literacy groups. And then the title schools would be giving you a picture of the entire school data.
So this is system-wide, school system-wide.
School system-wide. Well,
and do you break this down from class to class and building to building?
We can, but for the purpose of this, we looked at the program level data.
Right. My concern has been, and I haven't received an answer, about why some of the Title I schools have done so well and some have not, and what's the difference?
Well, in title school, we're talking about title intervention programs, and that's a portion of the title school. So if we're talking about their entire school doing better on performance, then I don't know if that would be appropriate for me to say it's because of title. I'd like to think we do have an effect on their certain percentages of the students during the day, because we basically, for our interventions, we're pulling students out for the most part. We do have some push-in programs, but we're pulling out those that are that have the highest need, and we're working with them. And then the coach, of course, does serve the whole school. However, most of the time they're working in coaching cycles with specific teachers. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the entire title school's data or if you're talking about these, because these are specific more toward the students that had the intervention.
Do you track that information by the student themselves as they proceed on through the years?
Yes.
And obviously we know the impact of Wonder Years and what it does for students' performance. Is the local district funding any of Title I? Wonder Years, not Title I.
No. Title I is fully federally funded.
Can we?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And as you can see, we go up to the higher grades as well, and there's a little less of an effect size as we move up to the higher grades, but definitely shows that early intervention does have a high effect size. So when we do have discussions with principals about budgets, we very much so recommend that we do early interventions in the school. We do look at specific data. Sometimes the principals are concerned with making sure that we're addressing those map grade levels as well. But we usually, every school has a reading recovery teacher, and we try to fully implement that, which would mean that we have one reading recovery teacher for every 2 first grade teachers.
And the title programs, correct me if I'm wrong, are in specific schools based on free and reduced lunch percentage, correct?
Correct.
And that cutoff number changes from year to year?
We always have to serve any schools that have 75% or greater free and reduced lunch, so we have no choice about that. But then after that, then we can go down lower. Below that, we just could not serve any that are 35% or below.
Okay, but there are schools that were Title I,
right? And
due
to funding issues, that's grown. We are serving less schools that are below 75%.
And I guess, Mike, is there anything that keeps us from? Is there anything that forces us to do it by free and reduced percentage as opposed to number of kids in a school? For example, if you have a 600 student school and it's 50% free and reduced, you have 300 free and reduced kids. If you have a 250 student school and it's 90% free and reduced, well, you have less students that are free and reduced than you would in the bigger school, and yet the bigger school would not have any title money in it. Is that accurate?
Basically, we rank schools by free and reduced lunch. That's how we
percentage or number?
Percentage, and then we fund them by free and reduced lunch students. So we have a higher dollar amount for the schools that have the highest free and reduced lunch, because we're trying to put more dollars toward those schools.
Percentage again, because there's a big difference.
Yes.
If you have a big school that's 50% free and reduced, that can have many more free and reduced kids than a small school that's 90% free and reduced.
We first have to rank them based on that free and reduced lunch, and then from there they're funded at the student level.
Okay. Second question: we have these percentages from Hattie. How do they correlate to the performance series quartiles that we've discussed, which show that the bottom quartile of students should gain in an average year quite a bit more than the top quartile? Is there a comparison here?
The root data is the same because it's brought from scale score from performance series. But as far as looking this correlating backwards, we have not done that for quartile 1. But in general, the quartile 1 students are the ones that are in the intervention classrooms.
Okay, because, and I've asked for this before, and I'd like to ask for it again. I'd like to see a comparison of performance series for schools in the wealthiest Title I schools and the poorest non-Title I schools, and give us a comparison to kind of see if that's an apples-to-apples comparison. Kids not receiving reading intervention in a very poor non-Title I school, and kids receiving reading intervention in a wealthier title school, to see whether or not those low quartiles, there is a distinct difference. Is that, I mean, I'm assuming that data is fairly easy to manipulate. Is that accurate?
It is. We get data 3 times a year on every student with all 3 of those tests.
Would there be an easy way to do the three wealthiest title schools and the 3 poorest non-title schools and give us a comparison to kind of isolate some of that extra money into those schools?
It is possible.
I guess one of the questions I have, and I know it's logistics, but there's no like litmus test. You qualify for these services by being a student in a Title I school, but you do not necessarily have to be a student on free and reduced lunch at that school to get those interventions, right?
Correct.
Right. So I think that's, and that's going to be really, really difficult logistically to handle. But I think it goes back to what Mr. Hosmer's been saying, is that, we always assume that all the children receiving these services are children that receive free and reduced lunch. They're not necessarily. And yet, conversely, if a child who needs those services is on free and reduced lunch, attends a non-Title I school, then they don't have access to those Title I services. And I think that's a tricky question to answer, but I just wanted to clarify that, right?
And that's kind of the fallacy in the system, because I know you got some schools that you would perceive as a fairly, I'll pick Wilder, fairly affluent neighborhood, tremendous poverty issue in that area, and high-risk kids there. But it's not a Title I school, and they need services. Some of them do, but it's not, all of them don't. And I understand where Mr. Hott, I think that's a very good point, because we have a lot of students that are high risk that don't get services. And it's
through
not
this
it's,
program.
Through this program. Oh, it's exactly right. And that's kind of my second point, is maybe we need to be looking at that differently and not saying just because it's Title I, we don't do some of these things.
Well, and that's kind of the reason for this. For example, the reading recovery. If, in fact, you can isolate that and say this is a tremendous difference in a kid's life, and we can isolate that by this comparison on performance series, then I think we do need to have a serious discussion about Title I or non-Title I, whether that should be a budgetary item. And I go back to a presentation on Common Core and at MSBA, and the presenter was talking about, districts need to start looking not at percentages but at numbers. And when you're starting to say we're going to look at percentages, then you're sometimes missing the big picture. And when you have a 600 student school that's 50% free and reduced lunch, you got to look at that as 300 kids that may or may not be in need. And so, I think it behooves us to start thinking a lot more seriously about, how we put money in different areas, and know if in fact these interventions have significant impacts. Why do the kids at Mark Twain or at Wilder that need them don't have them?
We know that poverty's moved south, that we have pretty high levels of poverty throughout the system now. So we can no longer just look at what's happening in Center City or not North Side. I think we need to look at it in the broader range. Another question is, do you use a similar screening tool throughout the system?
to screen for students that it depends on the grade level because we have different assessments at different grade levels. So we usually use multiple assessments to identify students that have the most need.
But consistent between,
yes, consistently through
between
each grade level, exactly.
Okay. And I know that Wonder Years and Head Start have done some research on the impact of what they have done. I think it would be helpful for the board to see some of those numbers too, to see, you know, you can read all the statistics about what we need to do to take care of kids, but seeing what it means here in our community and the impact over the last 5 to 10 years. As we move forward with some of these discussions, I'd like to see some of those
and
numbers.
definitely, you can see the Wonder Years has a very high effect size. Again, the earlier interventions have the highest effect size, which leads us to those conversations about ways to make sure that we're intervening before the gap grows. I think as we go through the grades, if that gap increases, it's much harder to intervene.
And we need to follow some of those individual children through to say yes. Really
and you know, another thing as far as literacy coaching, they do have a major impact on the instruction, the core instruction of the building, even though they're working with specific teachers on those coaching cycles, which are usually around 2.5 to 3 weeks. And in my opinion, it helps so much when you have not just an intervention, because an intervention might be very specific on reading, and then they go back to a classroom where maybe the instruction isn't at that level, so there's a disconnect. So it's important to think about almost like following a student through all of these interventions. Like, wouldn't it be neat to go and follow one of those students that gets pulled out throughout the day to see what is it like, and are there disconnects between this teacher and that teacher and what they're getting? So as you maybe think about non-title interventions, I do think that it's important to think about that core instruction. The coaching model is something that helps at title, and I know that's difficult to do at non-title sites. They have literacy leaders and supports that way, but I do think the systematic instruction across the board is key, so that we don't have to have a whole lot of interventions if they're differentiating instruction at the classroom level.
Can you remind us again of what the cuts to this program have been over the last 3 or 4 years?
Let's see if I can remember all. We had sequestration.
Basically, give me a general. It's mainly
well, we of course we had ERA, where we were riding really high, and we had about a $12 million budget. This year we're at $6.9 million from there. So it just not too long ago we had a lot more funding. And so
was ERA a big bump in what we did?
Yes,
so
it was even because we had we had about 12.4 million, I think, but that was over 2 years. So we did have a bigger budget that first year, and then the second year it went down more, and then we had the cliff from there.
So again, I mean, we're talking ideally what we'd love to be able to do, but we're operating in an environment where our partners at the federal and state level, in this particular program, the federal level, are not partnering with us financially like they used to. And yet we sit here and we know we can point to these kinds of numbers and say, you know, Representative Long, Senator McCaskill, you know, look at these numbers. This is what funding, you know, does for children. And yet, again, we're being asked as a local board to say, okay, how do we make this work with our limited resources? So I just would like to make that point. So, go ahead.
The least effect size, of course, is middle school. And I guess we have, I mean, it's not Title I. Nobody's really come up with an answer of what we do because, I mean, we say, if we catch them early, that's the best thing to do. But we're either missing them early or somebody's missing them early, because then we still have them in middle school, and when reading recovery is 0.94, which is, you know, really excellent, then we say, now those still aren't the ones in language arts that we're serving again, are they? I mean, we're looking at those see, to me, if we catch them early, we know they have this great effect size, but are we still
Are you saying are those still
catching
the
them?
same
Yeah,
people?
are these still the same ones? And are there, because I had the same concern, we're serving, what, 3 middle schools now or 2? 3. And we've got 9, so we've got a whole bunch of schools that aren't even served. And if we're doing an effect size of 0.41, you know, those are tough grades, and I understand there's no magic bullet for them, but they're that's where I don't know if our district does it, if Title I has one middle school that's doing really great. That's my soapbox is if we find something that's really working, then we don't ask people to do it. We tell them this really works, so we're not going to keep doing the other things that aren't working for those kids. And I guess that where those numbers are there, that bothers me at that level, because then I know what happens when they get to the next level. And I'm hoping all the early interventions are not these same kids that are in those red areas, but I know they've got so many other things attached to them, it still could be. Just, you know, I really would like for us to find those things like the reading recovery, and if that's what really makes a difference, and it makes a difference in middle school and high school, and we've got the data then as a district, then that's what I need to be emphasizing here. And I just think you've got a huge number of kids that we're serving with specific programs, and if we can identify what helps them the most, then we ought to be doing that in these schools, but also in the other schools where we got the same kids.
I was just wondering, when you were doing the statistical analysis, did you look at, for example, I'll just pick one, number 4, performance series math, grades 3 through 5. When you were looking at the intervention class, which I'll make sure I understand this, those are the students that have been identified as more than, 2 years below grade level at math. So they've been through multiple measures of assessments. And so they are in either a pull-out class or a push-in where they get specialized help from a math coach. Is that correct?
Math specialist.
Okay, math specialist. So you have those individuals, those students are in that intervention class with effect size of 0.79. Then all title would be any student in that building. They might not have been identified. They may be on grade level. They may be doing fine. So that effect size is the same.
It would be those students that are served as well as those that are not served,
within that building.
Within all title schools.
Okay. But all title does include the intervention students
Exactly.
as well.
You know, I think we wanted to provide a picture of the school. However, those that are identified as being in the intervention classes are typically, like you said,
They're
starting
small.
a lot lower as well.
Okay. Then if you did one more drop down and you had a category that was all students in that grade level, district-wide, do you think or do you know, would you see much difference in the effect size? I mean, that would kind of get back to that comparison of what Mr. Hosmer was asking for is, okay, so we have this for those students that are receiving these intense intervention, all those in that building that are enrolled in that building, and then all district-wide. How would that look? And I don't know if you did that, but if you did, I mean, did you look at that?
We actually have, I don't know if that's on, we actually have looked at that because we're very interested in general ed curriculum, what that effect size looks like. And Jill, help me out because I didn't bring the printout.
I believe it was.
But I think it was 0.51 in a regular ed, non-title school, because those students are on track, so you would want at least 0.4 or higher growth every year. But to move those students that are behind, it takes that supplemental piece. So the combination of the two is effective. We're always looking for ways to improve that.
Well, that's helpful.
So I think that we have Title I as one of our strategic discussions coming up in January, and we gave you some data points. And so those may be additional helpful information as we have our discussion about some of these issues of Title I versus non-title and funding and whatever.
One more.
Just one comment. It's not a discussion, but I mean, obviously we know the importance and the effect of the money that we spend on Title I, that it works, pretty much works. I think one of the really key things here is really having the good data of what our student population is of Title I, because it does mean funds. It does mean services that we don't get now, because I know we're under-reporting Title I numbers just because you can just look at the data with respect, just as they progress through school, when it goes down. And I just think that's something that, and I don't know, that's a Title I discussion, strategic discussion down the road of, how do we make sure we got, I'm not saying the numbers we got now are inaccurate, it's just I think they're understated based on what I think is actually in our community, and having that good data, good solid data would really be helpful for a lot of kids that aren't getting services that could get services.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you very much. And you've got a couple requests I've heard from board members of data that they'd like to have, right? Yeah.
And if Mrs. Luton can receive those requests, and then we can take them from there. So if you'll email Mrs. Luton request
For what?
for
For the data that you want?
Oh,
what
what-
you
oh.
did, correct.
Do you know mine?
Okay, you got those. Okay, we're having technical difficulties up here. Sorry. It's just me. Moving on to does anybody need a break?
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay. 8.02, Mr. Wendt. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you in your tracks.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Chodas. It is my pleasure this evening to review some updates to the guidelines for new school construction. This is a living document, and you may recall just recently in September, we went through and did some updates from our LEED standards to our green globes. This evening, I'd like to focus on some of the spaces and sizes within the document that you have up on the screen here and in your attachment. The first one is actually on page 2, where it deals with class size and goals. The original document just referenced the SP5 strategic plan, and there's nothing wrong, obviously, with the SP5 strategic plan. But as it references the DESE standards, it just references that in general. And within the DESE standards, there's both a minimal and a desirable. And as what we look at the intent of the SP5, we think it's better to clearly pick out the desirable standards as our goal for class sizes. As we go to page 3, where it talks about programs, and under A starts with the elementary programs, there's a couple of things that we're looking to adjust. Under 6, just dealing with the physical education, one of the things that we standardly do in any of our construction at this point is automatically separating the gym from the cafeteria, so that's just something that we automatically do. As far as the gyms and cafeterias, both to support regulation, high school basketball courts, dealing with size of spaces is in a different portion of the document, and I'll speak to that as we get a little further into it. Under item number 11, where it had talked about allowing special spaces, and that was really dealing with school choice options. As we look at 21st century learning and flexibility, we thought it better aligned with allowing for special/flexible spaces, whether they were specific to school choice options or not. And under the elementary, we added number 12 because platforms and stages just were not identified elsewhere in the document. As we looked at the middle school, just under the programming piece, number 16 was the same as the last in the elementary, dealing with the space and making flexible space. So that's the same in the middle school, and that's also the same change that you'll see under number 25 in the high school. Now, when we get into the actual size of specific spaces, and these are all recommended sizes, one of the things as we've looked at in going through our designs as we're currently working through projects And part of continuous quality improvement is wanting to update things as we see opportunities. And as we look at regular classroom sizes, we've typically targeted at 900. We believe as we look at 21st century learning and having flexibility in those space and that instruction is that we would like to look at targeting at 1,100 square feet per classroom. Bumping from the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten from 1,100 to 1,300 square feet. A resource room, a one-on-one recovery speech, we're currently at 450, a slight tweak there up to 500 square feet. The art classrooms, looking at going from 1,100 to 1,300 square feet. On G for music, there really wasn't a specific one set up for elementary, so we've added that for 1,100 square feet for elementary. The other music rooms stayed the same for secondary and high school. As we looked at student dining, all of the student dining previously was at 10% of TSP, or the total student population, multiplied by 40 square feet per student, and that we feel is adequate for our elementary and middle school. But as we look at high schools, we feel we need to expand that some, so we've bumped that to 50 square feet per student. Science rooms, in the past we've targeted at 1,250, and again, as you look at a typical science room, you have both a lab area and a classroom area, and that's always been a very tight configuration to work well. So we've looked at bumping that to 1,500 square feet. As we look at gyms, there's a significant change here. As we look at high schools, in the past, all we had specified is that you'd have a 10,000 square foot usable floor area. But as we really look at our high schools, and you take the 5 high schools we have, the best gym as far as functional gym that we have across the district is actually Parkview High School, which is 19,500 square feet. So we thought that should be our goal for if we were to build a future high school gymnasium, that's what we would target to pattern after. We looked at middle schools at the 10,000 square foot minimum floor playing space gives you that high school size playing floor for at the middle school level, and at the elementary level, just at a minimum, having at least a 5,000 square foot usable floor space. The auditoriums were at 50% of your total school population, and we felt that it would be a better use of that space if we were able to get 60 to 70% of the total school population into that space. When we looked at the security portion of the document, it was really targeting only cameras. And as we look at security today, we look at it differently. So the number of exterior doors, security exits and entrances, and cameras, all of that, as how we look at design and installed and using current research and recommendations as that continues to change and update. And we've changed how we approach that as well. And then really the last piece that I've put on here is how we review this document. Previously, we reviewed it annually with Building Services Department and then would bring to the board if there were changes. And what I'm proposing is that what we would review it annually with Building Services Department and the educational operations, we would send updates to you as a board, and at any time, I mean, it could be more frequently than annually, but any time that we would send an update to the board, if the board would like more information on it, they would ask, and I would be more than happy to bring an information item forward and to review that. And that is all.
Are there any questions of Mr. Wendt? Mr. Lee?
I have one. It may take me a while to get to the question here, but in our standards, we list a bunch of things or bunch of items to be included in facilities.
Yes.
One of them being either library resource center or library media center, whichever one you want to talk about. Now, my question specifically deals with alternative school of library resources and some standards for alternative schools, Studi specifically, which doesn't have a library. Is that something that
I would be happy to look at that. We haven't really
I'm not trying to
looked
put you on
at-
the
and it's
spot. I'm
not-
just thinking that
No, that's a great observation. It's really not identified in here. There is another counterpart to the new construction guidelines, which is where we do the renovation guidelines, that they walk hand in hand. But even within that, I don't believe that we specify anything related to alternative.
yeah.
And I think that is something we definitely
and I don't know if it's a different item per se, in your standards, but I just was just curious about if that. I thought our standard was having a library center in all of our schools.
And even in this point, that is one area we haven't touched in updating on this document yet. I need to spend some time with Dr. Hagerman and review through what does the future library look like.
Absolutely. No, I don't know what it looks like either, but I'm just thinking resource.
So that is something that
All right.
we definitely need to look at.
Any other questions of Mr. Wendt? Mr. Asman?
Just a comment that I'm glad that this is a living document, and I'm glad that a lot of flexibility was added into some of this, because I think as we go forward, we're going to see there's opportunities to build all sorts of schools and place them in all sorts of places, and to be limited to a kindergarten classroom, in 10 years, it may not be the way we want to go. It may be that we want just a flexible space that, allows for all sorts of different configurations during the day. So, I think we have to have these documents, obviously, as guidelines, but we always need to be cognizant of the fact that, how kids learn and where they learn and what that space looks like can be accomplished in a lot of different innovative ways that have no connection to any of these numbers.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wendt. Moving on to Section 9, just a reminder that we tabled the discussion on policies, and going on to 9.02. Thank you for being here. Dr. Harrell, that's you. That's all right. Wake you up over there. No, you're fine.
Last meeting, I brought to you the revisions to IKF graduation requirements. This is for second reading. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions related to this item? And we need to vote, right?
Yes, we do. Is Dr. Prater going to be returning?
No, I think he.
You want me to vote for him? I'll do it.
Is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second? It's been moved by Mrs. Bush, seconded by Mr. Lee, that the board approve proposed Board of Education policy IKF graduation requirements for second reading.
I'm not working, so
Mrs. Bush, you want the?
yeah, I don't.
Okay. Okay, moving on to 9.03, revision to Board of Education policy JHG.
And I'm awake this time. I apologize.
It's
this
you.
This is dealing with the reporting of investigating child abuse and neglect. And this was based on changes from SBA policy as well as state statute. I'm
there any
willing to take any
questions?
questions.
Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
A second?
Okay, been, moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Dr. Frederick, that the board approves proposed Board of Education policy JHG, reporting and investigating child abuse and neglect for second reading. Okay, Mr. 9.04, amendment to health plan.
Good evening. Each year in December, I bring to you updates to the health plan that are the results of compliance, regulatory, or clarifications, just to make sure our health plan is both in compliance and up to date with federal law and state law. So that's what I have for you. It's attached as one of the items to the action item, and the specific replacements or amendments are also listed for you. The changes here do not result in a reduction of benefits in any of our areas. It's primarily just clarification and compliance. a unit action tonight.
And
because
it
those,
wouldn't
take
have been a
effect.
collectively bargained thing, right? It's more just
Correct.
keeping us compliant to
It's
law.
the result primarily of federal health care reform and related law.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Renner, seconded by Mrs. Bush, that the board approves the attached amendments to the health plan as presented to be effective January 1st, 2014. Okay, Dr. Hackenworth, 9.05. We finally get to our guests.
Good evening.
I warned him it was going to be a long meeting. So.
The administration is requesting approval to enter into a lease and shared use agreement with the Boys and Girls Club of Springfield. It's to construct and operate a Boys and Girls Club facility as part of the new Sherwood Elementary School. The agreement specifies the construction of a 5,500 square foot facility to be occupied as dedicated club space with the addition of shared use space. The approximate cost for construction of the dedicated club space is $1.2 million to be paid by the Boys and Girls Club. The agreement also outlines a monthly usage fee for spaces identified as shared use. It's the administration's recommendation that the Board of Education approve the Boys and Girls Club lease and shared use agreement.
Any questions?
I assume it's been past our attorney, or he wrote the document.
Many, many times.
And
I
just wanted to make
I might take an opportunity now to introduce our guests before you vote. We have Margaret Swango, who is the president of the Boys and Girls Club Board. We also have Pat Gartland, who helped us to draft this contract from the beginning. We all took a trip to Toledo, and we were able to see some facilities in use. And we've worked with Steve, John Everest, Scott Went for several months now trying to get this contract put together. So it's been an interesting process, and it's a great partnership.
Yeah, I would just like to publicly thank the Boys and Girls Club for this opportunity to partner. I think it's going to be a model for other communities, certainly a model for what we do here, maybe moving forward. You know, our partnership with the Parks Department has proven to be such a benefit to so many, and I'm looking forward to this one being the same. So, Mr. Hosmer?
And I share in that enthusiasm. I think that it is a wonderful shared use of a school. My question, and I think it's answered in the lease, is that we've had situations where folks want to partner with us, and there's some promise of payment being made, but the agreement actually puts that into some type of escrow so that something unforeseen happens where somebody has to drop out of this partnership. That money is there for the district, so the construction cost would be.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
But I mean, otherwise, I think it's a great partnership, and it's a good way to use a facility. So
I move to approve.
It's been moved by Mrs. Bush. Is there a second? A second. And seconded by Dr. Frederick, that the board approve the recommendation to approve the Boys and Girls Club lease and shared use agreement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your work on that, and thank you, Pat and Margaret. Yeah, we're excited. Okay, Treasurer's report. Mr. Chodes.
Thank you. Looking at the financial statement for November, you'll see we continue to be a bit behind compared to last year at this time in terms of the revenue. But once again, the bulk of the revenue does come in the December through February time frame. One good piece of news is that the sales tax collections, which tend to be fairly consistent throughout the year, we're up $672,000 from the previous November, and year to date we're up $895,000, and that's compared to a budgeted increase of $500,000. So we're doing very well on the sales tax. The December property tax We should have that information sometime this week, so I'll be informing the board when we get that, since it is a significant number. Also, on the good side is that while the revenue is down compared to this time last year, the expenditures continue to be a little lower than where they were at this time last year as well. And I'll be glad to answer any questions the board might have.
Are there any questions of Mr. Chodes? Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second? Moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Renner, that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the routine action items, is there a motion to accept these? Approve them, I mean.
So move.
Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Dr. Frederick, that the board approves each of the routine action items as submitted. Okay, moving on. Mr. Monday, it's your turn. Please come to the podium. I think you're our only speaker. Thank you for being patient. You do have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. Greetings. I feel a little bit encouraged in seeing that a few of you are aging less dramatically as I am. But it's a great time of the year. It's kind of like the old snows we used to have back here in the Ozarks when I was growing up. Our history, our heritage, and our legacy of the United States education system definitely was founded by biblical Christianity. Up to the 1960s, we were #1 in mathematics, science, and history. And when we took God, the Ten Commandments, and the Bible out of the public schools, we dropped very dramatically. Samuel Adams, he was the signer of the Declaration of Independence and father of the American Revolution. And as it is our duty to extend our wishes to the happiness of the great family of man, I conceive that we cannot better express ourselves than by humbly supplicating this to the supreme ruler of the world, that the rod of tyrants may be broken to pieces and the oppressed made free again, that wars may cease in all the earth, and that the confusion that are and have been among nations may be overruled by promoting and speedily bringing on that holy and happy period when the kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ may be everywhere established, and all people everywhere willingly bow to the scepter of him who is the Prince of Peace. That is our American history, heritage, and legacy. Christmas represents a hope, a unique joy felt only at Christmas time because Christ the Savior is born. Dr. Billy Graham. I can't imagine that it's been almost a year since we were over here, but I want to share this with you. And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you, ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angels a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, good and goodwill towards all men. May God bless you all. May you have a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
You got that 3 minutes down, Bob.
I was going to say, to the T.
Pretty impressive.
Okay, moving on to comments from the board. Is there anything under legislative report?
I just make one comment just to update the board. This afternoon, the Supreme Court of Missouri ruled on the transfer case in Kansas City and basically reversed part of the appeals. What bottom line is, we're allowing transfers in Kansas City. So Kansas City students can now transfer to outlying accredited districts, the same as we have in St. Louis. So that's going to create a huge uproar on the west side of the state, just like it did on the east side of the state with transfers. And somebody told me today that was pretty much immediately could happen. I don't know what immediately means, if that's tomorrow versus school year, but lost that one. So now Kansas City students can now transfer to accredited districts within their own county or adjacent county, which there's 5 adjacent counties to Kansas City.
Well, and I think the thing that I never really realized about this whole thing is it doesn't include just the students that are currently in Kansas City Public Schools. It includes anybody, any school-age child that resides in that school district. So even children now that are going to private schools are able to be, they're able to transfer to out of Kansas City and go to an accredited suburban or surrounding district, and the District of Kansas City has to pay for it. So it's really a mess. Yeah.
Transportation. Yeah. Has provide transportation.
And provide transportation for them to do that. So with that in mind, we do have our legislative reception next Monday, 4 o'clock, Kathy? Yes. 4 to 6 here. Is it in this room or next door?
It's in the meeting room.
Next door. So I hope that you're all able to come and we can talk to our legislators about these very issues. So under future issues, if we could just make sure that that budget discussion gets put into strategic discussion in January, that will be good. I'm not in place of what we had because I think Title I was there, but in combination. I think we better, yeah. Anything under future? I do have each year this is under other. The MSBA sponsors the Belcher Scholarship, and we have students in our district apply for that scholarship, and we oftentimes will need a couple board members to look at those applications and put forth our nominee. So I know Dr. Frederick has agreed to serve. Is there somebody else that would be willing to do that? It's usually just reading through, one per school at the most, right? If we're lucky, unfortunately. So we still just have one. Okay.
I'd do it. I did it last time. And
Okay.
I enjoyed it. We both did it last time, didn't
Okay,
we?
great. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. Anything else? Go ahead.
One other, I just wanted to mention that this last weekend, the passing of a former school board member, Bill Majors, and he served on the school board in 1966 through 1972, and I thought it was interesting that Mr. Majors was on the board during much of my educational career in Springfield Public Schools, and just wanted to make mention of that and appreciate his service and all others that have served on the school board.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate that. Andy?
I was reading the Kansas City Star recently, and it was an interesting quote from a legislative leader in Kansas, and talking about budget issues and the fact that they were being bombarded with new taxes and fees and all these other things to keep their county afloat because of the draconian tax measures that Kansas enacted and that Missouri is going to try to enact once again. And it was just interesting that you see it on one side of the state, and we're going to just jump right down that rabbit hole again. So obviously we're going to have to be on the lookout for that next incarnation of that issue.
Those would be good facts and figures to have available next week when we talk to the legislators. Mrs. Bush?
I don't know if you read, I think it's the NSBA magazine or the National magazine in the last month. To MSBA, it talks about the five factors in successful schools and what they do. I think that might be an interesting discussion article. So if you don't have it, let me know. I can get it to you.
It's a very good article.
Anything else? I really appreciate been here since 3:45, getting through a lot of important decisions related to the search, and then